Hello everyone and welcome to the book Refuge, and it's that time of year. It's time for the mid-year book Freakout tag, and I'm really excited to do this because as I was writing it up I was reminded of all the great books I've read this year. A lot of these questions, this tag is something that's been around on BookTube for at least the last 5, maybe 6 years. I did it last year. I'm really excited at going over my goals about where we're at with everything this year so far. Despite everything else going to shit, my reading has been great, so I'm not mad about that at all. And as I was going through the questions for this, because I did like prep this a little bit so I could get the books ahead of time and stuff like that, I was having a great time reminiscing about books to myself and also thinking about all the fun books to come. And yeah, it's just really exciting. So first I'll go through the questions, and then at the end I will do a goals check-in. I figured I'd merge these two videos together because my goals check-in isn't going to take that long to say. If you do want to be reminded of some of those, I do have a whole playlist that's called 2020 Reading Goals. It's interesting how I have or have not stuck to it, but that's fun. But let's go ahead and dive right into this. So another thing, a lot of these questions are hard to ask because I don't want to end up listing a ton, but specifically for a few of these, I have bookshelves on Goodreads that give you like a full list of favorites and stuff like that. So definitely check out my Goodreads. It's in my link tree down below if you want more, because I definitely have more than one. But let's go with the first question, which is the best book you've read so far in 2020. This is hard because I've read a lot of books this year so far, and man, it's really hard to just pick one, which obviously I picked one that I've talked the most about recently, and that is just stuck in my mind because I really like fixated on it, and I did a dedicated review for it, and I was really into it, and that's A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mila Vane. I think she's doing some really innovative things with this book, that it is fully fantasy and fully romance and has such a great realized world, and yet you're gonna find this in the romance section of the bookstore when I think it has a world as vivacious and alive as any fantasy categorized book. Like, I would compare this to a Game of Thrones, and you can scoff at me all you want, but until you've read this and you see the world that's being built in, and I've also read the sequel to this because I got pre-approved for it. It comes out in July, and I see the world that's being built, and to me, obviously, I like it better than Game of Thrones because it's not as grimdark, which is, you know, whatever. The people who watch my channel, you know how I feel about that stuff. So this isn't out of left field for me to say I like a book like this more than that. But I have so many videos where I focus on what this book is about. If you want to know, you can go check out my dedicated review to it, or just go look it up yourself because it's amazing. But it has all the elements that I love in a book, and I just adore this so much. The next one, what's the best sequel you've read in 2020? And so for this, I had a couple answers. One of them is I put Fortuna Sworn, which is Restless Slumber, which is the sequel to Fortuna Sworn, which I read both of those books in March this year. I really, really enjoyed what was being done in them. This is another romantic fantasy that is going to be like, it's like going to be like 6 books long. It's just getting started, but there is a really great romance going, and there's a really interesting main character who is fierce and passionate and fights for what she wants and wants to save her brother and wants to, you know, just be left alone, and that's not going to happen for her, luckily for us. So I really love that. But another one I wanted to mention, because I don't talk about fantasy, I've just talked about romantic fantasy, but I don't talk about fantasy as much anymore because I'm reading a lot more romance. But one book that I was really looking forward to reading and did get to was The Winter of the Witch, which was the wrap-up of the Winter Night trilogy by Catherine Arden. This was such a powerful finale. I think it said so much about what a hero looks like, and our lead character in here, Vasilisa, she has no reason to be loyal to her people, her country, her faith, because they have betrayed her over and over and over again, and she still consistently makes sacrifices for beings way above her head, because we're dealing with gods and folklore and legends, and she is willing to continually sacrifice of herself and give up what she wants, which, I mean, yeah, that's the classic archetype of what a hero is, but this is someone more so than any like chosen one story I've seen. Vasilisa is a hero, and I think this is such a subtle trilogy. It is so beautifully spoken, and for a lot of people that throws them out, but I was so impacted by Vasilisa, and this book just got to me. And it also has a beautiful love story in it. It's that kind of love story that makes you like ache because the angst is pretty real. But I loved this. And so when I think of sequel, I really think of this one. A new release you haven't read yet, but you want to. So I went with some that I own. Shadow Wand just came out this month. This is the third book in the Black Witch Chronicles. I've been waiting a very long time for this book to come out, and I'm really excited to do it. It isn't the last book in the series, which means I like don't want to rush to it, but I also want to read it soon because I need to do a review for this one. But I love this series. This has been an anticipated release for like a year and a half for me. But I'm like afraid to do it because I know there'll be another cliffhanger, right? And then the other one is I finally need to read Crescent City, but I don't know when I will. Again, I only get so much Sarah J. Maas content every year, and so I like don't want to read it and then have it be done. But I've heard mixed things, but from the people that I care what they think about it, there's mostly been positive things. So I'm excited for that. And I think Sarah's books are good, and I think she only gets better at breaking my heart. So those are two new releases I want to read. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I just made a whole video about this. I'll go ahead and you can find that. I'll link it at the end of this video or up in the card. But a couple that stick out is I want to read The Bride Bet by Tessa Dare. This is the next book in the Girl Meets Duke series. I really love that series so much. Also, I'm just going to say it. I really want to read Midnight Sun. Like, it's not so much that I anticipate it more than other, like, books I have coming out because I obviously know the story. I mean, who doesn't at this point? But it's just, like, a part of my childhood that I want to kind of, I don't want to wrap it up, but there's just, like, closure that needs to happen with Midnight Sun coming out. And some people may say that it's just, you know, Stephanie can't come up with any new ideas. We're just reproducing the same thing over and over again, blah, blah, blah. This year there's a few books coming out where authors are just redoing things they've done before. I, like, can't get over the nostalgia of it. Like, Twilight got me into fantasy, got me into romance to a new degree, and I was so heartbroken when Stephanie Meyer's, like, first part of it got stolen, and she was like, I don't have the heart to go back. Like, I remember reading that on her website and weeping and hating whoever that person was that was so selfish that they would leak that and keep it be 10 years before we could read that. So there's just this, like, amount of closure that will come from getting to read this book in its entirety the way she meant for us to read it, and I'm just so happy about that. And I think a lot of people are, so I know I'm not, like, in the minority for this, but it is on my most anticipated list just because I want that closure to come, and I'm really happy that she finally felt inspired enough to do it. I do want her to be more inspired to read other things. I would love her to go back to a different world. Like, honestly, even The World of the Chemist, I really loved that book, and I love the host, so I would love for her to go back to those worlds. But, I mean, Twilight, it's not like she's going to be trying to do a gimmick. Like, we already knew what this was. There were parts of it out in the world where you could read it. I had a bootleg where I copied word for word the first 11 chapters that were in a locked document on her website. I copied them word for word into a Word document, printed them out, stapled it together so me and my friends could read it. So it's not like she's trying to write a new story and package it as something new. Like, we know it's the same story. We know what it is if you've ever read that chapter. But I want to own it, and I want to own it in the way that she meant for me to have it. And yeah, I love it. I love that sentiment has changed back. I got into a whole rant about that. I'm trying to set aside time to do my Twilight reread, because when we get into the goals part, you'll see that's something I haven't been good at, is doing rereads this year. But I'm looking forward to it. Every time I've ever stepped into Forks, Washington, I've just been sucked into it. So I'm excited to reread it. All right, biggest disappointment. I was already kind of hinting at this in the last question. It would be this, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I have a whole review and rant about this. No more needs to be said. I only think I have one more video I need to film with this, and then I'm unhauling that book, so we can say goodbye to it. Biggest surprise. Okay, so I don't have this one because my sister has a copy, but How Rory Thorne Destroyed the Multiverse, which I'm so excited the sequel has been announced. It's coming out in October. This book is so good. I have a full dedicated review for this one as well because it just surprised me. This is a sci-fi fairy tale retelling, so it's a little reminiscent of like Cinder, more so in just because it's like a fairy tale. It's a retelling of Sleeping Beauty, but in this story, like Sleeping Beauty, Aurora is actually the ancestor of Rory Thorne, because Rory Thorne was the name of the prince who saved Aurora, and then they got married, so all of her descendants, the first son was always called Rory Thorne, and then this family, after 200 generations, they have a girl, and they still name her Rory because Gilmore Girls, right? That's a thing in the future. And there is even still like fairies who they haven't been called upon since Aurora because there hasn't been a girl, and the fairies only give gifts to girls. And it's just a fantastic story. It is a possible arranged marriage setup. It is space battles and witty banter, and it's told by a chronicler because the series is called the Rory Thorne Chronicles. And I'm just very excited to continue it, and I loved that book. I loved it. Next, favorite new author, debut, or new to you. So these are just a few people that are like, they're like insta-buys for me right now. Milvain, she's on my list. She just is. Nikki Sloan, I'm slowly making my way through her backlist. I've read all the Blindfold Club books. I've read the Filthy Rich Americans. I've read the Torrid Duet, and I'm slowly making my way through all of hers. I love how she does BDSM. I love how sexy her characters are. I love that they're edgy and dark, but I still feel just oodles for them. Like, it just, I just love them so much. So she's on there. And then also Helena Hunting. I need to make it through her traditionally published books, but I really loved her Puck series. I think they're hilarious. Hilarious. All of them are on KU right now if you'd like to read them. They're hockey romances, and they just make me so happy. I think they're so sexy and hilarious, and I just appreciate her writing. I love the first one, Pucked. Like, people give it crap because it is over the top. It's outrageous. It's hilarious and funny, and the situations are ridiculous. The dirty talk is holy shit, and the main girl, like, she's a little bit unlikable. However, Consent, I have no, Alex Waters. That boy knows how to ask for consent in the most sexiest way I have ever read. Like, I can't think of another way. Because the way that he, at every step of the way, is checking in, making sure everything's all right, making sure his partner feels good, making sure that there is consent all the way through this, and not just the first time, in subsequent times, in you know, that once consent doesn't mean for all consent. And I love that. I love that. I think that, you know, authors don't have to write it that way every time. Obviously, I get it. But Alex Waters, I approve. All right, yes, new fictional crushes. So this is hard because I fall for most of the boys that I read. I just said Alex Waters is great. I was just rereading Serena Bowen books yesterday because I just got Audible Escape. Yeah, I did that. I dived into that. And I was listening to the Brooklyn Bruiser series. And I'm like, God, I love these boys. I love them so much. But the ones that I decided to pick, it's kind of funny. So I picked Ian Murray, which Outlander is a reread for me, in case you're new here and didn't know I was rereading the Outlander books. This time through, I have a completely new appreciation for Ian. I love him. The growth that he goes through, specifically in this book, which I have my full like review up for this, so you can go check it out if you want to see my section on Ian. But I just love him, and I ache for him. I ache for him, for the things he's went through in his past, for the things he's going through now, and for the man that he's come out on the other side. I'm reading the 8th book, and seeing him get to find love again. Actually just got to his second wedding, and I was crying so hard because I just want him to be so happy. And I've never felt that way about him before. Like, I've always just appreciated Ian. He's either like the comic relief or super cool. And I think maybe it's this time through where like, I'm like the same age as him. In this one, we're like the same age. And I'm just appreciating things that he's going through and how hard that would be. We're like, you're still young, but you've lived so much life. Like, he's been an adult since he was 15, and not even just because of like the time period it was, but also he has some really traumatic things happen to him, and he is no longer gets to be a child. And I love him. I love him. He's my boo. He's my precious. And seeing him with his new love, just like, I love it. And the parallels between Jamie and Claire and Ian and his wife is so cute. I love it. So then I have another Ian, which is funny. Ian Mackenzie from The Madness of Lord Ian Mackenzie by Jennifer Ashley. So I just read this book. I don't have a physical copy yet, but I ordered it and it's on the way, and I'm so happy because I'm just going to mark it all up. Ian has autism, and it was in a time where that was considered mad because he like doesn't look at people in the eye, and he's a savant in some ways, but he's seen as lesser. He's seen as like crazy, and he's put in a mental asylum and like tortured, and he still comes out with some of his sanity, but his family themselves are even like wary of him. Even though they love him, they want to protect him, they're still wary of him because they don't understand him. And just when he meets his new love, Beth, and he goes about pursuing her and goes about wooing her, I just sighed, and I love him. I love him. So he's on my list. And then the last one I want to throw in is, I want to throw in not another Ian, Ethan Dexter from, is this the Game Plan? I can't remember. I'll put up a picture of it. He is a virgin hero, football player, tatted up, pierced up. I love him. He is so sexy. He's amazing. Another one, full of consent. He is a pining hero, which I love. I love this story. I love that he falls for Ivy and that he waits for her. He waits to make his move. And when it's time to make his move, he's like, I'm making the move. And I just love that he's all in. And yeah, when I was thinking of favorite guys, like, I've reread his book 3 or 4 times this year. I love it. So he had to go on my list. I love how Kristen Callahan writes. The boys. I love the boys. Okay. Newest favorite character. So this one was fun. Like, I put Cam on my favorite character list because I didn't just want him as love interest, even though he would fit as a crush. So Cam is from the Lisa Kleypas world, we'll say, because he's in the Wallflower series and the Hathaway series, and he is the club manager for Sebastian St. Vincent's, the club that he takes over from Evie, for Evie when her dad dies, and he meets the Hathaways at the beginning of the series. This is the first book in the Hathaway series, and it's so cool. So he is half Romani, and he is an outsider in both worlds because he doesn't fit in with the gypsy culture because he works in the white man's world, making a lot of money, and they think that that is crass and poor and below him. And then like the white man's world doesn't accept him because racism, but he's too smart for that, and he doesn't really let it bother him. And he meets Amelia, who's in a little bit of trouble, and he just like sees her and he's like, that's a thing. My culture believes in that. I believe that you wander until you find a home, and he finds his home in Amelia, and he really makes her entire family's life better. He finds a partner. He's not looking for someone to command or boss around. He is protective. He wants to protect her, but he really falls for her whole family, her whole crazy, kooky family that everyone considers black sheep of the ton, and they make their own little world, and I love it. Every time Cam shows up in one of her books, I love it. I love seeing his arc as a character. When we first meet him as a younger man he's friends with Evie, they kind of grew up together. And seeing him go through the whole series, I love whenever Cam shows up. Then I also have Evie from A Heart of Blood and Ashes. I talk more about her in my review of it. This woman has had every single roadblock stacked against her. She's locked in a tower. She's abused by her father. She's weak. She's a cripple. She isn't beautiful. She has all these things stacked against her. I can't even talk. And she is a warrior bitch queen. She is the fiercest, bravest, strongest of character woman that I've read in a long time. And she also, at the same time, she has pride, but she doesn't have an ego. She is willing to make the deals she has to make, to do the acts that she has to do, to make the sacrifices that need doing, to get revenge for her mother, to save her people, and to become the queen that she's meant to be. And I love her. And you're missing out if you sleep on this woman. Well, you know what I mean. I love her. And the last one I want to mention is Rory Thorne. I already talked about her a little bit, but she is very clever. She has her like certain gifts she's given by the fairies that make her like very smart and like pay attention and graceful and wise. But she's also just such a fun character to read. And I really hope you give that book a try. I hope I have hyped it enough. All right, books that made you cry. Oh boy. I already mentioned a couple. Again, the Magic by Lisa Kleypas. Man, I could go on a whole rant about Lisa Kleypas. God damn it, I love her. Again, The Magic is kind of like a prequel to the Wallflower series. Some people call it book one. I call it more of a prequel because the series itself is about these 4 girls who are friends, whereas Again, The Magic is about Westcliffe's sisters. And I say sisters because this book is sold to you as it's about Aline and Matthew, and then like Olivia is supposed to be like it's a side romance, but it really is both of these sisters finding love. And Aline's story is a second chance romance. It's so beautiful. I've ranted about this one before so many times, but the struggle she's going through, and then the struggle that her younger sister's going through of loving a man who is an alcoholic in a time when alcoholism wasn't really like treated or even like acknowledged as a problem other than like you're weak for having an issue with drink. And I really like how Lisa Kleypas writes alcoholics and how they can change their ways, because I am a firm believer in that. This week, well, I don't know when this is coming out, but this month is my own father's 5 years of sobriety, which is a miracle. If you're someone who's lived in a home like that, if you grew up in a home like that, and you see someone who's been able to give it up and that there's life after it, but that it's something that will always be in your head. I feel like Lisa Kleypas shares that so beautifully in Again the Magic. And so I consider that book, it's a dual love story. Aline and Matthew do get more time, but Olivia is, to me, just as important in that book. They still get a lot of page time. I wish it had a whole book, because I want more time with Olivia and her love. I want to see how difficult that was and see the joy at the end, the win at the end, because it is possible, but it does feel like a miracle when it happens. It does. And then Her Perfect by Steffi Walls. This was a student-teacher romance. I wouldn't consider it an age gap. This does have trigger warnings of eating disorder. This is a brother's or best friend's younger sister or brother's best friend romance, and it was beautiful and it made me cry. And I'm going to keep going because we got a lot of stuff to talk about, but you should check that out. Book that made you happy. I want to talk about my Outlander rereads. These just make me happy. Like, every time I pick one of these up, I just feel so many feelings and I feel so happy. And a lot of you are like asking for my review of the 8th book, and it's coming. I'm over halfway done with it. I only have a couple hundred pages left, but I don't want it to be done. I don't want it to be done. So that's why I'm dragging my feet, because the 9th book is on the horizon, but who knows when. Like, it's like when you're out at sea and, like, you know you're supposed to be coming up to land. Like, you're there, but you can't, like, see it yet. You can't see it yet. But they make me happy. Most beautiful book you've been given so far? They're all beautiful. I picked this one. Incendiary just came out. I just hauled this, and I think it's pretty. There's not a lot to say about that one. And then, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? So let's talk about my goals now, because that's going to kind of fix in this. So that's the end of the tag. But I'm going to, like, take the 13th question, which is what books do you need to still read, and push it into my goal part. So let's go over. I had 8 goals at the beginning of the year. And so let's go through these. And the last, a couple of them have to do with books that I need to read. So the first one was read 120 to 150 books. I'm currently at 290 books halfway through the year. So if I stay on track of this, I'll end up having read 4 times as many books as I thought I would. So yay for me. Read 10 classics. I've read 2 of them. Finish some series you started. I've only done 1 of those so far. These are the ones where, like, all these videos are linked in my playlist, 2020 reading goals. A couple of them on that list, like, I'm not even going to attempt. Like, I was going to try to finish Wheel of Time this year. Probably not going to do that. I don't know if I will finish Wheel of Time. Reread 10 favorites. So I've reread a couple books. Like, I've reread the first 2 ACOTAR books. I reread Pride and Prejudice. But that's basically it. I'm still planning to reread Twilight, which is awesome because if you watch that video, I had a Twilight reread on my plan before we knew we were getting another book. So that just, like, vindicates me that it was the year to reread Twilight. So that's awesome. Host a live show. I've done 2 of these already. Super happy. Do 2 readathons. I've already done 2 of these. So we did the Light versus Dark readathon and the Romance Takeover readathon. So I did one of those in April and one of those in May, which is awesome because I don't usually do buddy reads, but now that I'm part of the romance community, they've kind of kicked my butt in a year and get me to do them. So I've done those. Get through some of my backlog. Not happening. And then number 8 was get monetized and hit 3,000 subs. So the first one is done. Yay! That happened just like a month after I made the video, so that's cool. And the second part hit 3,000 subs. Well, you can see where I'm at right now. I'm almost there. I'm like 200 away. So I feel pretty good. We'll do this by the end of the year. So there we go. That is the mid-year Freakout book tag, as well as where I'm at with my goals. So far, like the things that I'm actively going to try to do still is I do want to wrap up a couple of this series. Like I want to finish the Diviner series. I have 2 of those books left. I want to finish, there's a couple other on there, and then reread a few. So those are the ones that I'm actively pushing for. The other goals, I've either hit them or they're just not as important to me as they were when I made the goal. So there's that. But anyway, if you want to do this tag, you can check out one of the originals down below if you want to do it. I mean, if you're on BookTube, I feel like you know about this tag. But if you don't, you're tagged. Boop, tag you're it. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you'd like to chat with me during the week or other times, I always have my Discord link down below. I also have a link to my Amazon storefront where I always list the books that I've talked about in videos. Will be there if you want to purchase any of them. And yeah, I think that's it. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.